Your Art Unlocked is produced by Art UK, the online home of the UK's national art collection. This podcast is supported by Bloomberg Connects, the free arts and culture platform that provides access to over 1,300 museums, galleries, and cultural spaces around the world. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
My artwork can be intrusive. It can be confronting in a sense that it wants to do something with the viewer, and it can evoke both personal and collective associations. So humour is extremely important when you come across my work. You laugh, and then at the same time it's ambiguous and thought-provoking and disturbing. So the humour is a way in, and it's that tension between those two things that I'm interested in.
I think what's so special about Nina Saunders' practice is that it invites the viewer to look at ordinary domestic objects in a different way. That she's spoken in the past about when a work goes on display, it's up to the audience to kind of make their mind up about the work. And I think the ways in which she kind of plays around the themes around domesticity, but also themes around class or taste, is something that's really, really interesting.
Today, we're looking at a soft, upholstered object. Its shape and size resembles a dustpan, but it has been transformed into something much less functional and more sculptural. It is covered in a rich red and gold patterned fabric featuring a floral design reminiscent of upholstery or decorative textiles from the Victorian period. It appears slightly collapsed, as though it has been stuffed with soft cushioning rather than something rigid and firm. The body of the object curves inwards, creating a concave shape similar to the scoop of a shovel. Extending from one side is a short, rounded handle, although it appears soft and drooping rather than sturdy. Decorative braiding or trim runs along the edge, emphasizing its handcrafted quality. The form and fabric of this object creates a visual contradiction. It looks like a practical household cleaning tool, but its softness makes it wholly impractical. It sits somewhere between furniture, textile art, and sculpture. It feels both familiar and strange, but what exactly is it, and what era does it belong to? My name is Melissa Baksh, and this is Your Art Unlocked, a podcast that brings to life some of the more unexpected objects in museum collections. In this episode, I'm going to explore Mr. William Morris's pan for the application of utilitarian cleaning, a subversive sculpture made in 2007 by artist Nina Saunders. It's part of the permanent collection at the Pallant House Gallery in Chichester, West Sussex. This is your art in your museums and galleries, so let's get to know it a little better. Now, we know this is a podcast, so before we get started properly, if you want to look at this work for yourself as you listen, head to Art UK and search for Nina Saunders pan. Nina Saunders was born in Denmark in 1958, and she studied fine art and critical studies at Central St Martin's in London. She specialises in upholstery, the craft of building, repairing and covering furniture, a skill she taught herself. Since the late 1980s, she has been taking discarded chairs, armchairs and other domestic objects and transforming them into strange, humorous and at times unsettling sculptures. Furniture slumps, swells and twists in unexpected ways. Familiar objects seem to come alive before our eyes. Here's Nina to explain more about how she started to incorporate everyday objects into her practice.
Furniture's got a huge potential for expression, and everyday objects, because they're anthropomorphic, they have arms, a back, and you relate to them. So using familiar objects, I feel that the audience reactions, expectations and bodily experiences with the world and the objects are largely considered in the work. So it was just a sort of a very special moment that I got very excited about sculpture and what it could do for me.
Nina is fascinated by the stories that everyday objects carry with them. Many of the pieces she uses are found secondhand, picked up at auctions, charity shops, or even from the street, and she has spoken about how much she loves things that already have a story. At first glance, Nina's works seem playful and absurd. Armchairs sprout extra limbs, furniture appears to melt, and domestic spaces become somewhat uncanny. But beneath the humour lie questions about class, identity, memory, and the ways we experience our homes. Saunders often takes objects designed for comfort and familiarity and transforms them into something strange enough to make us look twice.
A dustpan is an ordinary household object that you'd find anywhere in your house. It's usually made from plastic. It's usually something that isn't given a particular value within the house. It's a functional object, whereas because Nina's work is covered by this luxurious looking fabric, it kind of gives the object a new life in a way.
This is Miriam O'Connor Perks, curator at Pallant House Gallery.
I think you can't look at Nina Saunders' work without thinking about this kind of playful aspect of her work. And it's almost quite surrealistic as well. When I look at Nina Saunders' work, I really think about artworks such as Merritt Oppenheim's Breakfast in Fur, so, the teacup, the furry teacup, and this kind of both alluring but also kind of disgusting thing that it's quite kind of comedic. So I think it's definitely contemporary artists taking this sort of great tradition, putting her own kind of spin on it.
It's interesting that Miriam references Merritt Oppenheim, a German-born Swiss artist who found early fame with the Surrealists and who Nina cites as a direct influence. Here she is to explain more.
I didn't really set up to make surrealistic work. It really came natural to me. It was what excited me. But saying that, I must have been hugely influenced by Surrealism and Dadaism and the avant-garde, from the French Dada artist Marcel Duchamp's famous ready-made fountain, a urinal that was submitted to the Society of Independent Artists exhibition in New York in 1917, to Merritt Oppenheim, fur-covered cup object, 1936. They introduced the phenomenon that art is not something that artists create and shape from traditional materials, such as paint, clay, stone. Artists can instead designate something as art. So it really opened up what I could do.
That tension between the familiar and the unsettling is central to Nina's work. We recognise the object immediately, but something isn't quite right. It's this sense of uncertainty that makes her sculptures so compelling, and it's exactly what we encounter in Mr. William Morris's pan for the application of utilitarian cleaning. Let's think about that title. There's a lot to unpack here. Titles of artworks can give us clues into the artist's intentions. Let's decode this one with Nina's help.
For as long as I can remember, I've been hugely interested in the arts and craft movement and been inspired by William Morris and his ideas. And the fabric, it's one of his prints called Autumn Flowers, and it's a really lush, thick velvet. So I've been using traditional upholstery techniques, and in this case, a cheap plastic mass-produced dustpan, which was a huge challenge to make, and in line with the craftsmanship and skill of William Morris.
So who was William Morris? Morris was an artist, designer, writer, architect, and social activist, but today he's probably best known for the richly patterned textiles, wallpapers, and furnishings that continue to influence interior design more than a century later. He was also one of the leading figures behind the arts and crafts movement, which emerged in Britain during the late 19th century. At the time, there was a clear divide between what people considered fine art, such as painting and sculpture, and the so-called decorative arts, such as ceramics, furniture, textiles, and glassware. The artists and designers of the arts and crafts movement wanted to challenge that hierarchy. They believed that beautifully designed, everyday objects deserved just as much respect as paintings hanging in museums and galleries. Their ideas developed partly as a response to the Industrial Revolution. As factories transformed manufacturing, goods could be produced faster, cheaper, and in larger quantities than ever before. While this brought many benefits, it also meant that traditional craftsmanship was increasingly replaced by machine production. For Morris and his contemporaries, something important was being lost. They valued the skill, individuality, and care that went into handmade objects. They believed that design should be honest, meaningful, and rooted in craftsmanship rather than mass production. These ideas are important when thinking about Nina's sculpture. After all, she has covered the work in fabric designed by Morris himself. By doing so, she's inviting us to think about his beliefs and how they relate to this transformed household object. Morris famously said,
"Have nothing in your houses that you do not know to be useful or believe to be beautiful."
He strongly believed that everyday objects shouldn't have to choose between beauty and practicality. A chair, a table, or even a dustpan could be useful while also being thoughtfully designed and aesthetically pleasing. What do you think? Should art be beautiful, useful, or both? For many of us, art feels separate from daily life. A painting or a sculpture might inspire us, but we don't usually think of it as serving a practical purpose. Morris disagreed. He believed art should be woven into everyday experience and accessible to everyone. He was also a committed socialist who believed good design shouldn't be reserved for the wealthy. In his ideal society, beautifully made objects would enrich the lives of all people, regardless of class or background. This brings us back to Nina's title, and in particular, the word utilitarian, which means practical or functional. The reference to Morris is impossible to miss, but she doesn't just celebrate his ideas, she also examines them.
Utilitarian describes something designed to be useful, practical, and functional, rather than beautiful, luxurious, or ornamental. And application leads to contradiction. And the contradiction is this beautiful upholstered pan. So William Morris rejected the soulless machine production in favour of small-scale production. And the tension between these two things again was thought-provoking to me.
Nina's artwork playfully imagines what a cleaning pan might look like if it was designed by Morris, and it merges the concept of utilitarian cleaning with decorative luxury. Nina's work operates in the gap between these two worlds. While Morris desperately tried to merge the useful with the beautiful, Nina completely breaks that union, taking Morris-like floral aesthetics and making the objects entirely useless, highlighting the underlying absurdity of trying to enforce strict philosophical ideals onto domestic lives. After all, she's taken a practical household object and made it impractical. The pan is beautiful, but it can no longer be used to sweep up dust. It is now a soft, decorative sculpture. Nina invites us to think about the function of objects and what purpose they take on in our lives. But remember, artworks do not exist in isolation. Their meaning can change depending on where and how they are displayed. The setting of Pallant House is particularly significant for this work.
You can find out more about Pallant House Gallery and hundreds of other collections on Bloomberg Connects, the free arts and culture platform. Download the app today.
Pallant House Gallery occupies a former 18th century townhouse built around 1712 for the wine merchant Henry Lisbon Peckham and his wife, Elizabeth Albury. At the time, it would have stood out as an impressive residence filled with finely crafted furnishings and decorative objects that reflected wealth and status. That domestic history lingers within the building today, creating an intriguing backdrop for Nina's transformed dustpan, as Miriam O'Connor Perks, curator at Pallant House Gallery, explains.
A part of our site is on a Grade 1 listed 18th century Queen Anne townhouse, which for the first 200 years of existence was a private home. And so through displaying an artwork that plays upon domestic objects, it has a really strong connection to that history of the house. But also at the same time, of course, now the house is a public space. So again, through those kind of tensions between public and private, which I think is another thing that comes across through Nina Saunders' house, you get those kind of connections with the space there as well.
Since 2006, every 2 years, Pallant House Gallery has commissioned contemporary artists to create work in response to the specific architecture of the gallery. In 2007, Nina transformed the staircase with her Autumn Flowers installation, for which she also created monumental seed pods upholstered in William Morris fabric. Here's Miriam to tell us more.
They were really disruptive, but also quite inviting because they were objects that appeared familiar and they looked like furniture, they looked like fabric, but they were also quite alien. And I think there's this really interesting mix between the manufactured and the natural that came across with this commission. These seed pods really kind of filled the entire space, and so it was this incredible intervention. And whilst you had these quite sort of alien natural forms within the seed pods, you also had this beautiful chair that Nina had reupholstered and kind of transformed it, so it was almost looked like it was kind of melting into the ground. I think at the time it was quite unconventional for our audiences.
The work also raises questions about domesticity and gender. Historically, household spaces have often been associated with women. For centuries, women were expected to take responsibility for domestic labour and household management. By the Victorian era, when Morris was active, more than 1 million women in Britain worked as domestic servants. Here's Miriam again.
I think there's something really interesting to be said about the ways in which William Morris talked about wage labour and the workforce during the 19th century, but also how domestic labour and unpaid labour, which this dustpan kind of represents, and how that fits into that kind of history of labour as well. So I think there's so many different layers of complexity within this work.
So by taking an ordinary household object and making it unfamiliar, Nina prompts us to reconsider these historical patterns and societal norms.
The pan also symbolises women's invisible labour throughout history, and it honours women's struggles and the ongoing fight for recognition. And you could also say this is something that's at this time been swept under the carpet.
So why do we associate certain tasks or objects with particular genders? Where do those ideas come from? And do they still shape the way we think today? William Morris's ideas complicate these questions. Many of the artistic practices he championed, including embroidery, textiles, and interior decoration, were traditionally viewed as feminine pursuits. His wallpapers, fabrics, and stained glass designs all drew heavily on craft traditions that have often been overlooked by the art establishment. In recent years, the women of the arts and crafts movement have received more attention, and that includes William Morris's own daughter, May Morris. She was an exceptionally talented designer and embroiderer and played a major role in the success of Morris & Co. She took charge of the firm's embroidery department when she was just 23, and later on, frustrated by the limited opportunities available to women artists and makers, she founded the Women's Guild of Arts in 1907. Her story reminds us that many women working in design and craft have historically been overshadowed, despite making significant contributions in their own right. This theme continues throughout Pallant House's collection, which includes the work of many women artists who fought to be recognised as artists rather than simply makers of decorative objects. Nina herself is well aware of this overlooked history.
There's a wonderful picture of Mrs. William Morris sewing. So she did a lot of the embroidery, and the point being that women did all this work that you do not notice sometimes, or you do not know about.
Today, practices such as embroidery, textiles, jewellery and craft are increasingly celebrated within the art world, and the distinction between decorative art and fine art has become far less rigid. This makes Nina Saunders' work an especially intriguing one to explore. It sits at the intersection of art, craft and design, and invites us to question the categories we've inherited and the assumptions we still carry today. The work takes a simple household object and elevates it into a disruptive, tongue-in-cheek artistic statement. By distorting this everyday item, she creates a humorous yet unsettling commentary on class, aesthetics, gender roles, and the politics of domestic spaces. Thanks for joining me, Melissa Baksh, artist Nina Saunders, and Miriam O'Connor Perks from Pallant House Gallery as we discovered more about Mr. William Morris's pan for the application of utilitarian cleaning. You can listen to more episodes of Your Art Unlocked wherever you get your podcasts.
Your Art Unlocked is produced by Art UK, the online home of the UK's national art collection, supported by Bloomberg Connects. Explore more art at artuk.org.